but I couldn't speak a word of English, and it's really funny because we had been in Texas for 7 generations. The Quiñones family has been there for hundreds of years. You know, a lot of people forget that Texas was once part of Spain and once part of Mexico. So I love it when people come up to me and say, John Quiñones, you're Mexican-American. When did your family come from Mexico? It's like, we were always there. Yeah. I tell folks, we didn't cross the border crossed us. Suddenly there we are, speaking English now, having to. And I'm a proud American, but I'm a proud Latino, of course, too. When I was 6 years old, I didn't speak a word of English. I remember the first day of class in first grade in Mrs. Gregory's Carvajal Elementary class. This is before bilingual education and before preschool and any of that. I went straight to the first grade, and I'm sitting there, kind of dumbfounded. I didn't know what the teacher was saying because she didn't speak Spanish. And I'm sitting there the first day of school, 6 years old, Juanito, and at 10 o'clock the bell rings, and all the kids, of course, go out to the playground because it's recess time. Where does little Juanito Quiñones go? I walked home. I lived 2 blocks from school. When I got home, and my dear mother, God rest her soul, Maria, said, Juanito, ¿qué pasó? What are you doing here? And I said, Se acabó, Mom, it's over. I love school. 2 hours? I think this is going to work out. She grabbed me by the ear and dragged me back to Mrs. Gregory's class. But it was a struggle. It was a long, hard struggle. I used to shine shoes on Guadalupe Street in San Antonio. We'd go to the bars, the cantinas, because the drunk guys didn't know how much they were tipping you. And we made a killing until coming home one night, a gang jumped us, and my cousin Joey and me, and I was 8 years old, and they stole all my earnings from that night, and all my shoe shine rags and my polish. And that was the end of my shoe shining career. But when I was 13, my dad was laid off from work as a janitor at my high school, in fact, at the school that I would eventually go to. He was the janitor there, and he was laid off. And we did what a lot of Latino families had to do in South Texas. We joined a caravan of migrant farm workers, all these trucks. We jumped into the back of those trucks, and we journeyed, my 2 sisters, my father and mother and I, 1,700 miles to Traverse City, Michigan, the cherry capital of the world. And from there, we went to a little town called Northport, where we harvested cherries for 75 cents a bucket. And I remember teetering on these ladders, looking over orchards of hundreds and hundreds of cherry trees, picking cherries with my hands for 75 cents a bucket. And it would take me like 2 hours to fill that darn bucket. It was hard work. And then we followed the crops down to Toledo, Ohio, right outside Toledo, a town called Swanton, where we picked tomatoes. And there I was a champion tomato picker, man. I used to do 100 bushels of tomatoes a day with these hands. At 35 cents a bushel, that's $35 a day. And my dad would do the same thing, and then my sisters would also weigh in. And it taught me so much about the value of the family, and the family coming together, and pulling themselves up in times of adversity. But it's true, I was on my knees, I'll never forget this, on the cold, hard ground at 6 in the morning, looking at a row of tomato plants that for a young 13-year-old boy's eyes seemed to go for miles and miles. That's what I had to look forward to that day. And my father, Bruno, looking down and saying, Juanito, do you want to do this for the rest of your life? Or do you want to get a college education? And it was, of course, a no-brainer. I knew I didn't want to do that kind of work for the rest of my life, but no one believed in me. And this is my message to the young people at my table, at tables throughout this dinner tonight. Never accept the negative messages that society so often gives us, especially people of color. They would tell me when I was in junior high school, don't be afraid, don't accept it. When I was in junior high school, I would go to my counselors, my so-called counselors who were supposed to prepare us for college. And I would ask them, how do I get ready for advanced courses in English or math? How do I prepare for the SAT to go to college someday? You know what they would tell me? They would say to me, that's great, John, that you have this dream of someday going to college, but we think you should try wood shop. or metal shop, or auto mechanics. Not that there's anything wrong with those wonderful trades. A lot of people make a good, hard living doing that kind of work. But I wanted to go to college, and they saw me as just another Mexican kid in a school in the inner city where 99.9% of the kids were Mexican American, and they figured my chances of making it in college were zero. My mother, thank God, my mother Maria was the only one that believed in me and would say, it doesn't matter, Juanito, that you have to wear the same clothes every other day to school. We wash those clothes. It doesn't matter that you have to take bean and tortilla tacos for lunch, but all the other kids are taking their fancy bologna and white bread. I think the beans were better. She would say, it does not matter. What matters is what's in here, in your cabeza, and what's in here, in your corazon. Thank God for my mother Maria, so I struggled on. And thank God for a teacher. There's always that, we talked about the 8th grade teacher that we all have here. In my case, it was Mrs. Gutierrez who taught me English. And she read the essays that I wrote. And she said, John, you're a great writer. I love your essays. Have you thought about journalism? And I was 14 years old. And I said, of course. I used to watch Geraldo Rivera on 2020. And he was the only one with a Latino last name, right? Rivera, here in New York. And he, Puerto Rican, and he worked at 2020. And my dream was to someday do what Geraldo was doing. And guess what? The dream came true. It was that teacher, Mrs. Gutierrez, who said, you should talk to people. And pretty soon I became the chief of editorials. So there I was, writing these big investigative stories, like, why are the teachers parking in the students' parking spaces? Tonight we go undercover. And I loved it, and then along came another hero, Upward Bound, a government program. Some people will call it a government handout. It was a helping hand, and that's all I needed, just a little helping hand. Thank God for Upward Bound and the TRIO programs in Washington. I'm like their poster child now, by the way. But thank God for that. I got to go to college. I got my degree at St. Mary's University in San Antonio. Then I wound up coming to Columbia University on a fellowship. I got a master's in and I got a job in Chicago as a local reporter. And you know, all you need is that little break, that little hand, a little crack in the door. And then it's up to us to make it, right? But we can do it. And just give us that damn break, you know? Just let us try. In Chicago, I did a story at the age of 26 years old as a young reporter, a story that I wanted to do about immigration. And it's amazing. 30 years ago, still today, it's a hot button issue. The same thing existed back then. I told my news director, let me go to Mexico and go undercover and pretend I'm a Mexican immigrant trying to get into the US to get a job here. So I wanted to follow the journey that so many of these brave people take every day, and it's still happening right now. So my news director said, if you're crazy enough to try to do this, go ahead. And I went to Mexico with a camera crew, and I went undercover. And I told my friends, I'm going to go undercover. I'm going to pose as a Mexican. To which they said, John, it's not going to take a lot of acting. But I posed as a Mexican citizen trying to make it into the US. And I found a coyote, a smuggler, who for $300, unbeknownst to him, he didn't know I was a reporter, he just thought I was another Mexicano. He gave me, he sold me a fake birth certificate and a fake social security card for $300, all captured on hidden camera. And then he said, tonight we're going to cross the Rio Grande here. I was in Mexico. So he puts me on an inner tube and I floated across the Rio Grande, all captured on hidden camera. And I didn't stop there. I went to Chicago, because that's where the station that I worked for was. We wanted to make it a local issue, right? So I got a job at a restaurant, at this Greek restaurant, where the owner had these 7 Mexican workers employed, and he had not paid them in 16 weeks. And every time the Mexican workers would complain, he would say, hey, you guys get to sleep in the basement here. You get to eat all the food you want. You keep complaining, and I'm going to call the immigration service and have you deported. And that happens this very day. So I got a job there as a dishwasher at that restaurant. Unbeknownst to him, he thought I was just another Mexicano who just arrived. And I get hired, and that day by day I'm washing dishes. And at night, I slept down in the basement with the other workers next to the dishes and silverware and cans of food. We all slept in the basement, and they told me. I still wonder what they must have thought, because by day I'm washing dishes, and at night I pull out a little camera. And I started interviewing them in Spanish. This is the great value of the kid who spoke Spanish. I was able to do the interview with them in Spanish, and they told me their tragic stories about how this man was holding them as virtual slaves in the basement. Well, the next day I came back, this time wearing a suit and speaking fluent English with a camera crew behind me. And I remember we had to chase the owner of that restaurant through the parking lot because he didn't want to talk to us. But the night that story aired on CBS in Chicago, the next morning, the US government moved in, shut down the restaurant, got the workers their money and temporary permits to stay in this country. And I knew then that those were the kinds of stories that I wanted to tell. I see journalism as, imagine this room, we do one, I don't know if you saw the bicycle theft scenario, where we have someone stealing a bicycle, and we had a young man, a white young man with hacksaw and wire cutters, cutting a chain to a bicycle in the park in New Jersey. And we told the actor, if people ask you, admit to them that you're stealing the bike, because we wanted them to know. We wanted to see what would happen, right? So when it's a white actor, people muttered something under their breaths, they shook their heads, but no one called 911. And then we switch actors, and now it's an African-American actor. Same age, same dress, with the hacksaw and the wire cutters. When he starts cutting that chain, within 4 seconds, people surrounded him like a posse, called 911, which they should have done with the white kid. And worse, they started taking his picture with their cell phone, saying, "We got you now." Even the black actor was like, "John, this is ridiculous. The white guy got away with it." And then as a final twist, we had a very attractive young woman in short shorts and a tight t-shirt with her hair blowing in the wind with the hacksaw and the wire cutters. Men helped her steal the money. I swear to God, they helped her. I remember there was this middle-aged couple on their bicycles, and the wife said to her husband, "Honey, she's stealing the bike." And he said, "Yes, but she's a damsel in distress." So he helped her move the bike, pull out the pole, and the actress is going along with it, going, "You're so strong." And thank you, thank you. I still wonder what their ride home for that couple must have been like. But that's what the show is all about. And it'll be back tomorrow night. We touch on some very serious scenarios. Among my favorite is one we did in Harlem about an interracial couple in Harlem who faced discrimination. We did one where a homeless person is walking down a sidewalk and collapses. First we did it with a well-dressed woman, and when that happened to her, within minutes, within seconds, people surrounded and rescued her. And then we said, okay, that's very impressive in Newark, New Jersey. People are helping this businesswoman, but what if it's a homeless man who's dirty and smelly and old and is holding a beer can in his hand? And we tried that scenario. Well, guess what? When he collapsed next to the train station in Newark, New Jersey, 88 people went by and no one stopped to help him. And we're about ready to give up and say, well, I guess if you're homeless and holding a beer can, no one's going to stop. When suddenly, we don't see it, but we hear it first. And it's like, it's the tapping of a walking cane on a sidewalk. And into the camera's focus comes this beautiful African-American woman who has a cane, a walking cane, because she's had a stroke. And she's homeless herself. And guess what? She stops. She doesn't have a cell phone, so she starts asking people going by, excuse me, can you have a cell phone? Could you call help for this man? There's a homeless man on the ground. Now he was white, she was black, not that that should matter. But 22 more people go by, no one is stopping. She then stumbles over and because she's had a stroke, and she manages to take the beer can out of the man's hand And she moves it over and puts it in the trash can, as if to give him a little bit of dignity. Guess what? 22 more people go by, and still they're not stopping. She looks up to the heavens and shakes her head in anger, as if to ask God, how can you let this happen? And then she stumbles over again, and we could hear this because the actor was wearing a wireless mic on the ground. And she said to him, "Sir, I don't know what your name is, but my name is Linda Hamilton, and I'm going to call you Billy." She said, "Billy, don't you worry, my man. I'm homeless too, and I'm going to stay here until help arrives." And finally, someone stops and calls 911. Then I come out with the cameras, and of course, in all the excitement, we lose our hero, Linda Hamilton, who disappears.
Wow.
We knew her name, but that was it. We put it on What Would You Do a few weeks later, and of course, our viewers, like yourselves, sent in all these emails and on Twitter, letters, phone calls saying, "Who was that woman? We want to help her." They raised $8,000 for her, and then they created on Facebook a Facebook page called Touched by an Angel, Touched by Linda Hamilton. So now I got to go find her, our team, and give her the money that was raised. So we spent 2 weeks in Newark with her picture, going to liquor stores, train stations, homeless shelters, asking, "Have you seen this woman?" And we found her. And when we did, my producer said, "John, you got to come out and bring your laptop so we could show her the piece of What Would You Do on television," because of course she had not seen it. And when I showed it to her, and she said, "That's you?" And I said, "Yeah." She goes, "That's me." I said, "Absolutely." So we got her the $8,000. We opened up a bank account for her. We got her medicine that she was supposed to be getting for her heart condition that she wasn't getting. We got her a place to live. And the one thing that made her most excited of all was we got her own cell phone. And she was jumping up and down for joy like a 10-year-old girl with her first cell phone. And I said, "Now, Linda, when something happens and you witness something disturbing, you can call 911. But at the end, I asked her, "A lot of people are calling you an angel, Linda. They're saying you're a hero for stopping and helping that man who was down. Are you?" And she looked at me and she said, "No, John, I'm not an angel. I'm no hero. Let me tell you what happened," she said. "I think God put me on that corner, on that street, on that day, because he knew you were there with your cameras. And he knows that I'm homeless too, and who better to teach America a lesson than someone who's been there." So tonight, I leave you with that message from Linda Hamilton. I mean, here was a woman who was homeless, who had suffered a stroke, and she stopped and helped a man who was down when no one else would. She stopped. Not because she was going to be on national television, she didn't know that. Not because she was going to get all this money and medicine and a cell phone and a place to live. She did not know that. She stopped and helped her fellow man, a stranger, because as we say in Spanish, el corazón, her heart, told her it was the right thing to do. Thank you for having me here tonight.